UAPs.
UAP.
A UAP.
The UAP topic.
Unidentified aerial phenomenon.
UAP.
UAPs present serious national security concerns and a potential existential threat.
UAPs are real, they're here, and they're not human.
Deny, deny, deny.
It was an object directly above that ICBM nuclear missile.
Within the span of 8 days, we lost 20 nuclear missiles to UFOs.
The Legacy program. This program had been capturing, retrieving, and reverse engineering UAPs since at least 1947. The Vatican has irrefutable evidence that non-human intelligence exists.
Reporting of UAP activity over the ranch.
F-16s from a nearby Air Force base were alerted to intercept this object.
Biological effects of encountering UAP.
Unexplainable phenomena.
Do you believe that our government is in possession of UAPs?
I know the exact locations. I actually had the people with the firsthand knowledge provide a protected disclosure to the Inspector General.
Do we have the bodies of the pilots who piloted this craft?
Biologics came with some of these recoveries, yeah.
Non-human biologics.
We are absolutely not alone in this universe.
Probing our capability.
Pentagon released its report on UFO sightings today, saying an additional 366 sightings have been investigated since 2021.
UAP have been observing and clearly been interested in our rapid progress.
Self-preservation is number one.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
Excessive secrecy has led to grave misdeeds against loyal civil servants, military personnel, and the public.
UAP should be taken seriously.
I think the American people are ready to receive the truth.
That moment is imminent.
The recovered material from the crash, including the bodies, were all sent up to Wright Field, which is now called Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. That's where the U.S. had their best reverse engineers.
The truth is out there. We just need to be bold enough and brave enough to face it.
What if I told you the government has already admitted that something is flying in our skies and they don't know what it is? Not a conspiracy theory, not a blurry Facebook video, not crop circles and probing. Official declassified files. Objects moving at speeds that we can't match, making maneuvers that don't make sense, and showing up in places they definitely should not be. And yet, no clear answers, even after full government investigations and disclosure. Over the last few years, agencies like the Pentagon and NASA have quietly released reports, footage, and internal investigations into what they now call UAPs, or unidentified anomalous phenomena. Not UFOs anymore, because apparently flying wasn't broad enough, which is either reassuring or deeply concerning. And also because many suspect they're in the ocean. Pilots have encountered them, radars have tracked them, infrared systems have recorded them. And in some cases, these objects outperform anything we know exists. No wings, no visible propulsion, no explanation. So the question isn't just, are they real? That part's already been answered. The real question is, what are they? Where do they come from? Some suspect outer space. Others suspect our very own oceans, which, by the way, have been mapped less than the planets of our solar system. Because it's either cutting-edge technology we don't understand, or we're sharing airspace with something that definitely didn't follow flight plan. In this series, we're going to break down the actual declassified files, the footage, the interviews, the encounters, and the theories, without the nonsense, without the tinfoil hat, and without pretending we all have the answers. Because right now, nobody does. And that might be the most interesting part of all.
President Obama was just on a podcast talking about how he believes in UFOs and hinting that he saw something when he was president.
Well, I said this in my podcast too. What's funny is we've kind of asked my father-in-law about this because we're like, well, what do you know? Because Miranda, we all want to know about the UFOs, or we all want to know what's going on. And he played a little coy with us. And so that, of course, led us to believe, Eric and I were like, oh my gosh, if he won't even like fully tell us, maybe there's more to it.
And that's just the thing. Every time a president or someone in Congress or someone who was in NASA brings this stuff up, they say, yes, I believe in it. Yes, I've heard things or whatever, but then they play coy and they don't actually get into it. There could be NDAs in place, of course, or something similar, but it's still very strange. And a lot of you have heard of Brandon Biggs. He has a channel called The Last Days, And one thing that was kind of his claim to fame is that the President Trump assassination attempt that hit Trump's ear, he predicted that ahead of time, months ahead of time, and he also predicted specifically that the ear was going to be hit. He also predicted the Mardi Gras terror attacks before it happened. So he has a few things that he's had this vision, and then it comes true. Now let's listen to what he has to say.
This was a massive looking spaceship thing. It was gold. It was thin, and it had lightning bolts beaming all around it like it was all alive. It was over the Vatican. It was over Italy in the vision. And the other one was over the temples, these Mayan-looking temple things in Mexico. But the people had signs. They had, like, welcome to Earth. And they had signs, and they were excited about this alien thing going on in the sky. So they were, like, tinfoil hat people. Like, I'm talking, had signs, and I started to laugh. Because when I saw it, I thought, that's really funny, Lord. And the Lord said, no. This is not funny. This is a great deception. And many people are going to fall for what's about to take place on the earth. They're trying to come up with an alibi. The demonic is coming up with an alibi of what happens when the rapture takes place. This is a great deception. So then, over America, I saw balls of light that were traveling at the speed of light very quick. Choo, 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 choo. And they would go into Canada, and they would go up and down the East Coast.
Now, one quick thing about these balls of light, could this be the fireballs that we've been seeing? We've been seeing a pretty big uptick in fireballs all around the world, including in the United States. And I just did a previous video on that. And people like Stefan Burns have been documenting it and showing individual videos. But are we seeing something similar to that? NASA says some of them are going up to like 35,000 miles per hour.
And there was more than one, but they were the size of a little car. And they were coming out of the mothership. And the Lord kept saying, fearful sights you will see that will bring you to your knee. They will fall to their knee, Brandon. And people are going to be freaked out over what they're about to see.
Now, this could be what some people say is Project Bluebeam, for example, which is where there's going to be this big conspiracy, as they call these things, where they're going to use like lights and fake ships and things like that to give the impression that there are aliens coming to attack the Earth. It may even go as far as like shooting missiles at these ships and things like that. That's Project Bluebeam. So that might be something that he's alluding to here. But I thought I would bring this up because it's very interesting that we have the disclosure stuff that's supposed to be coming up from Trump. We have previous declassified files, which is what we're going to get into here shortly. And then we have stuff like this where people are warning of Project Bluebeam or something similar. So I would say the big takeaway is there's a lot of confusion, and that might be by design. So you have to really have that discernment to know what is real and what is fake, what is for their gain and what is to hurt us. And just because I want to make sure I get all of his messages into this one video, we'll do this one as well.
Jesus looked at me and he said, months before I come back to get you, they're going to talk about aliens a lot. It's one of the signs. And this is in 2014. He said they're going to talk about aliens a lot.
Now, this was 12 years ago that he put this video out. And now we're starting to see more of that disclosure, more of the talk about aliens are real. We heard something recently, people saying that we were alien hybrids and there was a breeding program. And this came from Matt Gaetz, right? This isn't the government. This was stuff that was officially put out. There were interviews done. It's interesting that this was done that long ago and it's still relevant.
It's going to become a big deal. And he told me, you'll know and to be watching for the great deception that's about to take place. There's going to be something take place. There's an event. You'll see. There's a great deception. It's all set up. Whenever the lady at the beginning, when I told you she was frantic, screaming, the aliens come, it's going to be talked about in the media like all the time. It's going to start to become like, I almost say the norm. And it almost is, isn't it? Kind of interesting. Where we are from 2014 to 2021.
One of the things I found very interesting specifically about Brandon Biggs and what he's seen, he talks about the idea that the powers that be would use the rapture as an excuse to say the aliens came down and took those people. So you would see Christians taken up in the rapture, and then you would see governments say something like aliens came and took them. And that would be like Project Bluebeam. Very interesting. Now, this next piece comes from TMZ, and of course, they are famous for shenanigans. And strangely enough, they've been very involved in the Nancy Guthrie case. A lot of the letters and things that have been sent, the ransom letters, have been sent to TMZ. But in this case, they spoke to a very prominent whistleblower, and let's see what they have to say.
What I want to make sure I'm understanding is a member of our government has told you and others, I guess, that there is a form of alien life and machinery which maybe brought this living creature here that interacted in some form with people?
Yeah, they have, and they've. It's pretty wild. I know, but I'm just telling you, I'm not going to lie to you. I'd take a lie to tell you. You want to put me on a polygraph? I'll take it.
This is Tim Burchett. Now, he has been very involved in this whole effort to get disclosure out, especially from the military point of view. And many are saying that he's kind of the front runner of all this.
But, this is what the guy told me. I mean, I've had a very high-ranking naval official describe, I've talked about this before, underwater craft, something big as a football field, moving at over 200 miles an hour. And there's no fish in the ocean that would do that. We don't even have a sub that'll probably do 40 miles an hour under.
Remember, this is also the gentleman that said that Iran had a mothership off the West Coast that was sending drones into the U.S. Do you remember the New Jersey drones from last year? Well, this is the gentleman that was talking about that. He's the one that did the interview, and guess what? He was correct. They did have a mothership, although it was a aircraft carrier, and it was designed specifically to deploy their drones. So he does have a history of saying some of these more outlandish, kind of more outrageous things. But in that case, it was true.
And the last thing he said before he left my office was, it was kind of weird because he didn't go out he went out the side door, which nobody ever uses. And he looked at me, he pulled me up close, and he said, Tim, they're real.
What I want to really show here, and what I want to make sure I get the point across is, it used to be that the information we heard was from people out in the country, farmers, hillbillies, if you want to call them that. They would tell their story of getting abducted, and typically it was not seen by anyone. Maybe there were crop circles or something else. They saw bright lights. Maybe they said they got pulled up into a ship and experiments were done on them. They were probed. We've heard all these things before, right? But the difference here, and like you saw in the intro, is that these are high-level military scientists, definitely some whistleblowers in different areas, secret organizations, people that have worked in those organizations and seen this stuff firsthand, they say. And they actually testified to Congress of the things they've seen. So this takes it to a whole nother level. This goes from like hearsay, Uncle Billy Bob said that something did something to him, to we have our government saying that this is official. This is something that is on the books, on the record. Some of the stuff they said they can't talk about because of non-disclosure agreements or the level of classification. But that is why we're trying to get more disclosure to come out. And that's why Trump is talking about possibly releasing more information. And then, of course, some people claim it's just a distraction and we shouldn't pay attention to it. Now, there's a ton of information, lots of videos, footage, interviews, case studies. So we're going to start getting into that portion of it. And then the future videos will basically jump right into that stuff. And this, to me, is where it gets interesting. So make sure you stay tuned. A lot of what we're going to look at comes from Project Blue Book. Project Blue Book was the code name for the systematic study of unidentified flying objects, also known as UAPs now, by the United States Air Force from 1952 to 1969. The project was headquartered at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Ohio, and was initially directed by Captain Edward Rappelt and followed projects of similar nature such as Project Sign in 1947. Project Blue Book had two goals, namely, to determine if UFOs were a threat to national security and to scientifically analyze UFO-related data. This is one of those images. As you can see here, there's something that looks like a UFO that is vertical instead of horizontal, and it's out here in the trees, and it's just kind of hanging out. And, someone like us, we could look at this and say maybe there's, strings hanging it from the trees or something similar. We can't really tell how far away this is, but this is an official image that they have on file, and this is declassified. So this is something that they're saying this is legit enough that we're going to keep this on file. This was from June 4th, 1964. This is the same image of that same UAP or UFO, same day, June 4th, 1964. And now you can see it is upright. this is horizontal again. And again, people could say, well, is this hung from the trees? You know, is this some kind of a model or something they put there to try and set this up? We don't know, but we do know they kept it on file. And this is another angle. This was taken through the trees, maybe as it was flying off. Again, you have a situation where you have this object here, and this time it does look further away. It doesn't look like it's hanging from anything. And here's a different angle. This is now no longer beneath trees. This one is out in the open, and they are here filming it. And this one, to me, looks like it's maybe smaller, but you have to remember back then, they didn't have drones and things like we do now back in 1960. Or maybe they did, they just didn't tell us yet. And then here's one last image of the same encounter. We have their vehicle from back then, and then over the top of it, you can see this UAP or this UFO again. And it doesn't look like it's being hung from anything. It does look very kind of fakey, like you would expect them to look back then, but this is officially in the archives. We have some sightings. You can see here these tiny little white dots. We have those sightings. Those are in New Mexico. Interestingly, we also have Okinawa. So this is Okinawa, Japan. And they're saying in this one, they see these lights, and they see it flying across the sky, almost like a meteor. And they see it in multiple different spots moving around. Couple more in the sky. And now we'll jump to our first interview.
I am here to discuss the so-called flying saucers. The Air Force interest in this problem has been due to our feeling of an obligation to identify and analyze to the best of our ability anything in the air that may have the possibility of threat or menace to the United States. In pursuit of this obligation, since 1947, we have received and analyzed between 1,000 and 2,000 reports that have come to us from all kinds of sources. Of this great mass of reports, we have been able adequately to explain the great bulk of them, explain them to our own satisfaction.
And that's something you're going to see that's a common theme. Many of them they'll try to justify in various different means. Some of them is just verbal. Some of them they just kind of wrote off. Other ones they say it's strange and they can't quite explain it. And then other ones they've done actual case studies saying, here's what they saw, here's what we think it is. It's nothing, right? So we'll look at some of those too. That's actually really interesting as well. But I think we can debunk one of them for sure. We can debunk their debunk. As it goes to show you, they're trying to take everything seriously as though it's a threat to national security, which is the main reason why all of this kind of started. But you'll see there's some they cannot explain.
We've been able to explain them as hoaxes, as erroneously identified friendly aircraft, as meteorological or electronic phenomena, or as light aberrations. However, there have been a certain percentage of this volume of reports that have been made by credible observers of relatively incredible things. It is this group of observations that we now are attempting to resolve. Our basic difficulty in dealing with these is that there is no measurement of them that makes it possible for us to put them in any pattern that would be profitable for a deliberate, custom sort of analysis to take the next step. We have, as of date, come to only one firm conclusion with respect to this remaining percentage, and that is that it does not contain any pattern of purpose or of consistency that we can relate with to any conceivable threat to the United States. We can say that the recent sightings are in no way connected with any secret development by any department of the United States.
Now that's an important distinction here because this is not just a United States thing. For example, Gorbachev during the USSR, they also had sightings and they had issues with UAPs and UFOs and that kind of stuff. So this is not just a United States thing, which a lot of people incorrectly assume that it is. I just want to point out the initial thoughts that a lot of these people were thinking is that a foreign government was creating these type of objects to infiltrate, to destroy, to spy, and those type of things. And that's kind of where all of this kind of bred from.
Major Keyhole, as author of the book Flying Saucers Are Real, what is your opinion of these new sightings of unidentified objects?
With all due respect to the Air Force, I believe that some of them will prove to be of interplanetary origin. During a 3-year investigation, I found that many pilots have described objects of substance and high speed. One case, pilots reported their plane was buffeted by an object which passed them at 500 miles an hour. Obviously, this was a solid object, and I believe it was from outer space.
As you can see there, this is very similar to when they just went to Congress and did something similar. They gave full disclosure, their positions. These are people that are credible. These are people that have not been diagnosed with any mental illness or anything similar. A lot of them were military and fighter pilots. And we're seeing similar from back then, back in the 1950s. They were saying similar things or the same things as what we're hearing now. This next item is called the Avrocar. And you're going to see that it looks very similar to something else. Let's check it out. Now, I want you to note the year, 1958 to 1959, United States Air Force contract.
An extensive program of research and development in the field of disk flight, which was started in 1952, is being conducted by Avro Aircraft Limited at Malton, Ontario. Early studies on behalf of the United States Air Force proved the feasibility of a circular planform vertical takeoff aircraft utilizing a system of peripheral jets for propulsion, stabilization, and control. The current phase of the program entails the design and construction of the Avrocar, an 18-foot diameter test vehicle for the United States Army.
Does that look familiar? Is there anything else that we've seen in movies, cartoons, videos, hoaxes, people saying they got actual footage of these things? Does that look familiar? Kind of interesting.
The Avrocar will take off vertically and carry a useful load of over 1 ton for 125 miles. It is intended primarily for operation within 400 feet of the ground over terrain of not more than 10,000 feet altitude at level flight speeds up to 225 knots. When the basic design criteria for the vehicle were established, construction of a full-scale wooden mock-up was started. The vehicle is powered by 3 Continental J69 engines driving a turborotor located in a central air inlet.
Now, one interesting question about this, and a thing that a lot of people bring up to me, is why does every sighting we see, why do they have lights? Just something to think about. Why do UFOs or UAPs, including the drones UAPs we saw last year in like New Jersey and some other states, why do they have, in some cases, they have a green and a red light, which is what's required for like boats and airplanes and things for navigation. And in other cases, why do they need lights at all? If they're so advanced, why do they need lights when they're traveling across terrain on the Earth? You would think they'd have super advanced imaging and things like that and wouldn't need lights.
The turborotor expels air through ducts formed by the ribs and skins to a nozzle at the wing periphery for propulsion and control. As detailed design information became available, the installation of systems and equipment progressed. The completed mock-up provided a dimensionally accurate and fully representative model for evaluation prior to construction of the first Avrocar.
Now, this is dimensionally accurate reconstruction of what? What is this modeled after? That's the question. And if you look at certain projects, like the Legacy project, they basically took and reverse engineered things that had crashed, things that they recovered.
A 1/20th scale model designed and manufactured for use in the Avro ejector wind tunnel provided preliminary data on the aerodynamic characteristics of the Avrocar, both in hovering and in forward flight.
Notice what they said there. It can hover and it can do directional flight. And you also notice as well, if you look at this guy here, that kind of, not exactly, but looks very similar to the size and the metal and everything of the images that we looked at earlier, right? So is it possible that they were testing out smaller versions of these, and that's what some of those other previous sightings were?
To provide more detailed aerodynamic data, a 1/5 scale model of the Avrocar was designed and constructed for testing in the Massey Memorial Wind Tunnel at Wright Air Development Center. Before being dispatched to WADC for installation in the tunnel, the model and its supporting structure, together with integral force balance, were assembled. Tests were carried out to check the functional behavior of the model and the balance. Wind tunnel tests, including flow visualization tests, were performed to determine aerodynamic characteristics and pressure distribution during takeoff, hovering, transition, and forward flight.
Now, I want to remind you, this is being done by the United States Air Force Base at Wright-Patterson. So this is not Hollywood. This is not for theatrics. This is something that is being designed by our military and our government.
Tests were performed at the Orenda Engines Test Establishment at Nobel. Here, airflows and pressures could be provided to the segment to match those supplied by the turborotor in the actual vehicle. Vertical takeoff and hovering are achieved by downward deflection of the peripheral jet, which in the proximity of the ground produces appreciable thrust augmentation. Transition from hovering to forward flight is achieved by rearward deflection of the jet. This hovering model was built to investigate the system of stabilization used in the Avrocar. An electrically driven gyro in the center of the model simulates the turborotor and operates gates controlling the emission of air at each tip of the cruciform.
This is all the way back in the 1950s. So imagine back then that an aircraft that looked like a UAP, a typical UFO that we would see in movies and film and things like that, and they have a gyroscope to balance it. They say that it can hover and it can move around left, right, forward, and back. So the only thing that it would be missing is the speeds at which we witness these things by fighter pilots and other people that are either trying to attack them or that picked them up on radar. Now, we've had 76 years since this to keep developing this stuff. So imagine what they have now.
On the vehicle, the gyroscopic characteristic of the turborotor is used to sense the rate of imbalance in pitch and roll and introduce corrective bias into the flight control system.
Real quick, guys, just want to say, make sure you hit that like, subscribe, and share this around. And there are ways you can support the channel down in the description. Let's get back to it.
With the release of drawings of the main structural components, planning and tooling for manufacture of the test vehicle began. Manufacture of the 1,700 different detail parts required for assembly of the major structural components of the vehicle commenced in a security-guarded area where the vehicle was to be built.
Now, if you didn't know any better, and you were seeing this for the first time, and you'd seen movies like Independence Day or something similar, you would think that they were just casually putting together UFOs. It's very strange. I hadn't seen this footage or anything even similar to this until I saw the declassified files. And this kind of blew my mind because it started getting the wheels turning like, is this something that, did we do this? Like, is this us? Like the sightings and things we're seeing around the world, is this something that we manufactured and is legit? Is this something that we actually created? Or like Project Bluebeam, is this all just a hoax? Now, based on what we're seeing here, it would seem as though this is legit. This was a United States Air Force project.
As assembly of the primary structure of the first vehicle neared completion, manufacture of detailed parts and major structural components for a second vehicle advanced rapidly. After assembly of the primary structure and the installation of the tricycle landing gear, the vehicle is removed from the final assembly jig. The turborotor, which is a turbine compressor combination, was developed by Orenda Engines Limited. To achieve a lightweight unit, hollow brazed steel compressor blades are used. In this pilot program, one blade was processed to prove the suitability of the copper brazing employed in manufacture. The completed turborotor was then installed. Finally, it was checked in readiness for the extensive ground test program. The entire assembly was mounted in the turborotor test rig, and the tusk-shaped exhaust ducts used in the vehicle were fitted. To simulate the power provided by the 3 Continental engines, part of the output from one Orenda turbojet was ducted to the test rig.
One thing I want to point out is just how insanely loud that is. Now, remember, this is the early days, so this was some of the original designs and tests and experimentation that they did. But this isn't saying specifically that the United States Air Force has created UAPs, but it does look very suspicious, doesn't it? But you would think with how loud this is, that would be a dead giveaway in these sightings. But these sightings don't say that they're extremely loud. In fact, they rarely talk about the sound at all. They typically mention more just like bright lights and the fact that it moves so fast and things like that. But if there was an engine like this that was roaring this way, that would have to be something they would remember. They would say it was so loud it made me deaf, or it was so loud I could hear it from off in a distance.
Subsequently, a second turborotor, which had been proof tested for 8.5 hours, was installed in the vehicle. During construction, numerous tests were carried out on the various airplane systems. Typical of these were control system checks. Installation of the inner wingtip permitted mechanical checking of the transition control rings. The rings are used to direct air during hovering and transitional flight. Similar tests were conducted on the spoiler rings and yaw control vanes in the throat of the peripheral nozzle. The vehicle was weighed, and estimated values of weight and balance were confirmed. After weighing, the Avrocar was moved from manufacturing into the test area. Successful completion of ground tests will enable flight testing to commence and provide information required for development of the Avrocar.
What does that look like to you? When I first saw this video in the archives, and this is declassified, you saw at the very beginning it said it was classified, but this has been since declassified. When I look at this, the first thing I think of is like Marvin the Martian, and they had all these saucer-shaped UAPs or UFOs that had like the little clear bubble over the guy. That's almost identical to what this looks like. But it's very interesting because the idea of this hovering and being able to take directional changes and things like that, and I think they set up to like 400 feet from the ground. I mean, for something this heavy, that's pretty impressive. But this is 1950s technology. So imagine throughout the years how this could have progressed if this is what is creating some of the UAPs. And one of the biggest questions to me, period, of all this whole video, is where did this design come from? And was this reverse engineered from something? Now it's your turn. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. And as always, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this around. And there are ways to support the channel down in the description. And of course, don't forget to come back for the next part 2.